All right. Hi, everyone. This is Michelle Greenblatt with Chaikin Analytics. I'm going to be coordinating our onboarding workshop for today. So just quickly, I'm going to play from start. If you could just chat yes in the screen, in the chat box screen, if you can hear me, if you can see my screen. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to view it afterwards in the Resource Center, and I'll instruct you on how to get there. But just confirm with me, just for peace of mind, that you can see my screen, you can hear me okay. I see Maurice chatted in yes. Thank you for that. All right, well, it looks like we can get started then. Oops, sorry about that. Man, went a little quickly. All right, I'd just like to introduce myself. So I'm actually not Joe Bacella, but as I said, my name is Michelle Greenblatt. A little background on me: I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 2014. Shortly afterwards, I worked at an investment partnership in New York, a private partnership. And then a technology company right here in Philadelphia before joining Chaikin. I work very closely with Joe Bacella and Mark Chaikin as part of our client success team, and our entire role is to work with all of our subscribers to make sure that they have a profitable strategy to be successful with Chaikin. So part of that is coordinating these onboard workshops. If you're a new subscriber, this is absolutely essential to attend. We're going to go through the best practices of using Chaikin as well as a tour. But if you're a returning subscriber, it's a really great opportunity to ask us questions and go over maybe some specific stocks that you'd like to see. Getting a little ahead of myself, but it's actually in our next slide, the purpose of today. Our basic methodology, we always recommend analyzing the overall condition of the market. This is a very essential piece into selecting a good groups of stocks to analyze. And the whole point is so that you'll have a very consistent and disciplined strategy so that every day when you wake up and you open up Chaikin, you have a very specific step-by-step guide to follow to be successful with it. And the whole point is so that you can use this strategy again and again to make profits. We'll also go through a tour of Chaikin Analytics, so we'll go through all the buttons and make sure you know where everything is. And again, use your chat box. If you have questions throughout, type it in. We can go over anything you'd like. And who knows, somebody else might have that question, so definitely don't be shy. And at the end, we'll have a live Q&A so we can go over all of those. Before we go through that, I really want to direct your attention to the Resource Center. This is going to be your best friend if you're a new subscriber. If you click in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, looks like a stack of books. Simply click that and you will open up a page that says Chaikin Analytics Resources, and there are lots and lots of helpful links there. I believe we might have a link of it later. But you'll be able to register for our subscriber sessions. When I say subscriber sessions, this is a calendar of the different types of sessions that we host. So right now we're in our daily workshop. Again, we have it every day. There's no limit to how many sessions you can attend, so you can come to as many or as few as you'd like. Again, you have the opportunity in all of these sessions to ask questions and have them answered in real time. It's really the fastest way to get something out if you are really curious about something. On Tuesday and Thursday mornings, we also have our pre-market session. This will go over very, very in-depth analysis of the market. Joe Bacella, our Director of Client Success, usually hosts those. We also have option sessions at 11 a.m. So if you are an experienced options trader or you're just looking to get into it and learn something, we go over the best practices of using Options Play, which is actually a separate company that we partner with, but that's the module that you'll see within Chaikin. It can be, a little confusing at first, but you'll see it after attending a couple of these sessions and asking questions, as well as looking at the guide that we have. It's really simple to use. Last but not least, on Monday afternoons, we usually have an open forum session with our Chief Market Strategist, John Schlitz. you'll recognize him from the Morning Insights emails. He has an absolutely fascinating perspective, a very experienced technical analyst, and we do a live Q&A as well. It's kind of like an advanced session of the Q&A that we have at the end of our daily workshop. So I highly recommend all of these sessions. A lot of our subscribers find that it's a great way to just stay engaged, stay involved, and again, ask any questions that you like. So before we get into our core methodology, I would love to hear from you. It'll help me kind of shape today's presentation, and maybe at the end we can go over some examples that tailor to your specific strategy. So first, tell me what you prefer to trade or invest. If you're looking to buy and hold, if you're more interested in options, if you'd specifically like to classify the stocks you invest in that have a high yield or give a good dividend. And also tell me about your desired time horizon. So if you're a swing trader, you're looking to enter and exit a position within 1 to 3 weeks. If you're intermediate, it might be 1 to 6 months. Long term might be 6 months or more. Really no wrong answers here. Again, as I said, it'll just help me maybe pick some strategic examples that might help outline, how we would use Chaikin for that strategy. So go ahead and type those into the chat box. I see lots of people chatted in. Thank you so much. That is really helpful. Option, swing trade, great. You'll find that Chaikin can be successful for you regardless. Let me just mute all. Just as a reminder, all the microphones are going to stay muted for today. But as I said, the session is being recorded. So if there's anything you want to review later, this recording will be available to you. All right. So thank you all again for chatting in your answers. Let's get started by analyzing the market. So when we analyze the market, we emphasize 3 kind of key bullet points and how to get a really good picture of what the market's been doing and where it's likely to head in the future. So those 3 key bullet points are first, understanding the charts, so looking at all the technicals on the charts. Second is checking the spider sectors. And third is integrating it with market insights. I didn't mention this in the beginning, but if you have a pen and paper and you want to copy this stuff down or copy it down when you view the recording, I highly recommend it. I'm a person who likes to make lists and notebooks, and I found that, after repeating these lists and continually taking notes, it's become a much more efficient process for me where I'm able to analyze the market pretty quickly and compare and contrast it to my notes from the past. All right, so let's get started with this. Oh, just a little disclaimer. We have a Chaikin Market Academy disclaimer, more like an advertisement, kind of shameless plug, but the Client Success Department has been working really hard to provide greater educational resources to all of our subscribers. And Joe Bacella is actually starting what we call Chaikin Market Academy. There'll be 2 different sets of sessions. If you'd like to learn more, absolutely research it. It's going to be excellent, a very in-depth explanation of best practices of analyzing the market using Chaikin. If you're new to investing or experienced, I really think that you'll get a lot of use out of this. So definitely, if you'd like to learn more, I highly, highly recommend this. All right, so assessing the technicals. Right now, you'll see that everything else on this chart is grayed out, and that's because I really want us to zero in on what we see in front of us, which is the SPY. That's the ETF for the S&P 500. Why do we look at this? Because the S&P 500's performance overall is a really good indicator of market health. So that's why we like to analyze the SPY. So when you wake up and you want to analyze the market and try to get a picture of it, go ahead and type SPY in. And you'll be able to pull up the same chart. So what do we see when we look here? If you're a new subscriber, I'm just going to quickly review some of the lines on the chart. I know it can be a little confusing and overwhelming, but the more you look at it, the more familiar you'll become. And again, it'll just be a really efficient process for you. So of all the lines you have here on the chart, the green vertical lines are going to be your price bars. And if you actually click the crosshair symbol, it's a circle with these 4 dots, you'll be able to compare and contrast between the individual price bars. So it'll show you the high, the low, the exact money flow measurement, things like that. So those are the green vertical lines. You'll also see 3 white dotted lines. So the top and bottom white dotted line are called Chaikin bands. What are Chaikin bands? They're similar to Keltner channels or Bollinger bands. They're measures of volatility. And the way that we use them is we look at where the price bars go in reference to them, right? So if the price is nearing the top band, it's likely to dip back down, whereas if it nears the bottom band, it's likely to go back up again. The middle white dotted line is actually
Muted. Unmuted.
Sorry about that. Sometimes we have some technical difficulties. What I was saying was the middle white dotted line is a 21-day exponential moving average. So those volatility bands are calculated as a standard deviation away from that 21-day exponential moving average, which is why it's in the middle. The other line on the chart that you'll see is this orange line, and that is a 200-day double exponential moving average, also known as our long-term trend line. And we generally if we're looking for a classic bull, we like our price bars to be above a rising long-term trend line, and conversely, if we're looking for a bear, we like it to be below a falling long-term trend line. Again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was very clear on what you're looking at the chart. The other technical indicators we have here that are relevant when looking at the SPY are Chaikin money flow. Chaikin money flow is something that Mark Chaikin is most famous for creating back in the 1980s. It measures institutional investment, so what the big institutions are doing. So periods of green are when the institutions are heavily investing in something, and periods of red are when the institutions are selling. There's actually in the Resource Center, which I had outlined earlier, the stack of books. If you click Resource Center under other educational tools, you'll see Understanding Chaikin Money Flow. And if you want to learn more about how it's calculated and more specific and in-depth explanation of what it's measuring, I highly recommend checking that out. It might be, a little too technical, but it's always interesting to learn more about. Finally, we have our overbought, oversold indicator. This is an 100-point scale. Those 30 and 70 marker dotted lines are just there for points of reference. But again, if you click that circle up at the top, you'll be able to see what the exact overbought, oversold score is. And overbought, oversold usually works in tandem with the Chaikin bands. So you'll see here, it's not always the case, but usually they work together where if it's overbought, which means it's above the 70 marker line, and it's also near the top of the Chaikin band, the Chaikin volatility band, then it's more likely to dip back down. Conversely, when it's at the bottom band and also oversold, meaning below the 30 marker line, then it's more likely to creep back up again. Why is this important to know? Just so we can evaluate where we are now, where we've been, and where we're likely to head in the future. So when I look at the technicals on this chart, I see that there's two W-shaped bottoms. These price bars are forming two W-shaped bottoms, which characterize market corrections. And what I want to do now is compare and contrast these two W-shaped bottoms, one that started late last August and one that started in the beginning of this year in January. And I want to see, okay, how do I know that this W-shaped bottom isn't going to bring me into the same type of performance that the last one did? And there are a couple of differences. So first, I'd like to look at Chaikin money flow. Coming out of that W-shaped bottom, that market correction, we saw a sharp increase up and then a sharp decrease down. While it's always good to have, institutions investing in the market, it's not really a stable, kind of consistent set of investments. Whereas what we see here, starting back in late January and mid-February, is much more consistent and stable set of institutional investment, which lends further confidence that institutions are likely to continue in this pattern. What we saw was a February 11th low, and since then we've been in a rally for, I guess, the last 8 to 9 weeks. And there are a couple of indicators that will lend support to that rally continuing. But just from the technicals here, we see the money flow and that we're short-term a little bit overbought, which could mean that there might be a dip coming in the future, but not necessarily. we also want to look at our key support and resistance levels, which, in the short term, we have kind of this resistance at the 210 range. And what we're looking for over the next couple of weeks is whether or not we'll be able to break through from that resistance. All right, so let's look at the spider sectors. Cool. So the other thing that we want to look at when we're evaluating the condition of the market is how the spider sectors have been performing week to week. And what is highlighted here, if you actually click, it looks like a white triangle surrounded by a circle in the upper right-hand corner. If you click that, you'll be able to see the power bar differentials. What this tells you is how many bulls and bears and neutral stocks are in each spider sector respectively. And what we're looking for is to see if the number of bulls to bears in most of the sectors has either increased, stayed the same, or decreased. And what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is that more and more sectors have positive differentials, so more bulls than bears, and you want to look into those sectors specifically that might be primed for growth. You also want to be mindful of sector rotation. So last week in Market Insights, which I will be talking about shortly, he discusses a sector rotation out of sectors that are more defensive, like utilities, and into sectors that were previous underperformers, such as financials and materials. So you might want to just pay attention to those differentials, which ones have the most bulls, and then maybe look within those sectors for good bull candidates, which you can now do with our new sector view. So if you actually just click up at the top, there's Workspace, Screener, and the Sector tab. You can drill down further into our sectors, subsectors, and now see some ETFs within those sectors as well. If you're looking to purchase an ETF within financials, you'll be able to compare and contrast the performance of those sectors and also see what their top holdings are. So I highly recommend exploring this on your own. A good tip to keep in mind, especially if you're a new user, there's nothing that you can do within the Chaikin platform to break it or mess anything up. So I highly recommend just clicking things, exploring. You never know, if something looks like it probably does something, then it most likely does. So keep clicking, keep exploring and asking questions. It'll definitely ensure that you have the most efficient use of the platform possible. Last but not least, after we evaluated the SPY, we looked at the spider sectors. We want to integrate that all with our expert analysis. And our expert analysis comes from Mark Chaikin and John Schlitz. Mark Chaikin has 50 plus years of Wall Street experience. This is his passion, his pride and joy. And he provides these amazing articles every Sunday. He sends out Market Insights. There's two ways to access them. They'll either be emailed to you, so everybody gets the emails, but just in case you miss it or you want to look at it again, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen next to the stack of books, there should be a light bulb symbol. And if you actually click the light bulb symbol, you'll be able to see all of the market and morning insights that have ever been, published, as well as the stocks of the week, earnings ideas, things like that. I love accessing it from this because I can quickly switch between morning and market insights, and I can also look at a stock of the week. I was interested in reading more about Urban recently, and I recalled that it had been a stock of the week a couple of weeks ago. So instead of scrolling all the way through my email, which I get a lot of emails, I just clicked that light bulb symbol in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. I clicked stock of the week, and within 10 seconds, I was reading the article about Urban. So very, very important to read these. And putting it all together, I actually think these are a little bit outdated, but when you're looking at the chart of the SPY and the spider sectors, which we have on the screen now, you want to be mindful of Mark's commentary. So he does a really great job of distilling a tremendous amount of information into this 1 to 2 page article that will take it into account other factors that you don't have on the charts, right? So things like announcements from the Fed. Last week they decided not to raise rates. Earlier this year they reduced the amount of likely rate hikes from 4 to 2, and they're taking kind of this wait and see attitude of how the economy does, how the economic reports go, and whether or not they're going to raise rates. And of course, that always has an effect on the stock market overall, and how investors feel. People sometimes panic if they interpret news badly, but it's always good to keep that in mind and what effect it'll have on the market. And since they've taken this wait and see attitude, it's likely to not cause any panic or sell off, at least in the short term. Again, he emphasizes key points of support and resistance, and he'll give you, some advice in terms of using either short-term periods of market weakness to purchase bullishly rated stocks, or maybe to wait it out and see if the rally will be sustained. I believe recently he was advocating to use those short-term periods of weakness to look at those bullishly rated stocks. But again, it's really important to know what the market's doing before you even look at stocks, because if it's not a good time to buy, then you could really lose out. So that was us putting it all together with market insights. Morning insights are absolutely very useful as well. They're more technical, so they might give you, whereas Mark will say, here's what the market did last week and here's what it's likely to do next week. John might say, here's what the market did yesterday and here's what it's likely to do tomorrow. He provides a lot of charts. He'll look at some specific stocks that have just recently moved. Again, very, very useful. I can't say enough about those. All right, so we've analyzed the market. Now let's look at analyzing a stock. And in analyzing a stock, there are two key steps. The first is qualifying the stock, determining whether or not it's a stock you want to be even involved with in the first place. And the second step is timing. So determining your entry exit points. Both are very key and both need to happen successfully in order for you to be profitable. So when we think about qualifying a stock, we love to look at this document called Finding Long and Short Ideas. This is also available to you in the Resource Center. So if you'll recall earlier, I was talking about the stack of books. If you click that, you'll be able to access a document on money flow. You'll also be able to access this amazing document, Finding Long and Short Ideas, especially if you're new to the market or you're new to Chaikin. A lot of people love this because it gives you kind of a very clear-cut checklist of what a classic bull looks like and what a classic bear looks like. So when we're looking at a classic bull, we'll just start with that. We're looking at a very bullish rating with persistent green, and as you can see at the bottom here, I know it's kind of tough to see on this picture, but I'll have a bigger one up shortly. But the Chaikin power gauge is located at the bottom of the screen, and you want it to be persistently green as opposed to, spotty periods of green with periods of yellow or red. You also want it to be above a rising long-term trend. So you'll also recall that that orange line is our long-term trend line. So not only do you want the price to be above that, but you want to make sure that that line itself is also rising. Conversely, with bears, obviously you'd want a bearish rating or a very bearish rating with persistent red, and you'd want it to be below a falling long-term trend. But just to put things in perspective, the reason that we like to analyze the market overall is usually it's a good practice to go in the direction of the market. So the saying goes, a rising tide raises all ships. It's usually true, if the market is likely to perform bullishly, it's like the rally is likely to continue. It might be a better strategy to look for bulls rather than bears. That said, it's not impossible to find good bearish trades as well, even in a bullish market. So we'll look at both. And then determining our timing, we like to look at things like money flow, relative strength, and that relative strength is in comparison to the SPY. So that was, what was indicating the health of the market overall. So relative strength versus the market versus the SPY. And then we like to look at strong industry group. And of course, for bears, it would be the opposite. So weak Chaikin money flow, weak relative strength, and weak industry group. And we're going to look at some specific examples. We also really want to pay attention to overbought, oversold in terms of our timing. An important thing to keep in mind here, more often than not, growth does not look like a smooth bell curve upwards. It'd be really nice if it did, but unfortunately that's just not how it works in the stock market. But rather, stocks more often follow this Wyckoff pattern of accumulation, breakout, and markup. So you'll see periods of volatility. So don't be nervous if you enter a stock and then it drops, shortly thereafter, because the general pattern with these classic bulls is that it'll have periods of higher highs and higher lows. So generally it's going up, even though it might kind of waver on the way up. The screener is going to be one of the best and easiest ways that you find these classic bulls or even classic bears by entering the criteria that we talked about just now into the screener. So if you just type screener, you'll be able to enter in some criteria to find stock. So I believe that the criteria we entered in here doesn't match up exactly to the finding longs and shorts document. We have bullishly rated, oversold, and the relative strength to be very strong, and we came up with this list of stocks. Important to keep in mind, and I'll go over this in the quick tour, but this blue funnel here at the top next to Russell 3000, that's our global filter settings. If you click that, it'll allow you to adjust for price, liquidity, and capitalization. So if, for example, you're looking to screen for stocks and you'd like to exclude any stocks that are under a certain price, penny stocks you might not be interested in, or very illiquid stocks you might not want to invest in either, turning on the global filter will immediately eliminate stocks that don't meet your specific criteria. So, it's totally optional. If it's blue, that means that it's activated. If it's gray, it means it's not. Just something good to keep in mind. I also highly recommend that with the screener, you just follow that same strategy I recommended earlier with clicking around, trying different things. Run a bunch of different screens, save those lists, and keep track of them. Try to monitor them over time. I have lists that I made months ago, and I thought they were classic bulls at the time, and it's really interesting for me to see, wow, gee, if I had invested in those stocks then, here's how I would be doing, and this hypothetical money that I could have made, I suppose. But I highly recommend exploring the screener. It's very, very useful. So now we're going to go into two examples. One is going to be a classic bull. The other is going to be a classic bear. Well, not quite, but we'll see. So let's go back to that criteria that we were looking at. We have UNH, which is United Healthcare Group, medical care. UNH has a very bullish rating. And it seems to be above a rising long-term trend. So we have those first two check boxes checked. We also see that there is strong Chaikin money flow, although it's dissipating a little bit, but that's probably because it's nearing this overbought position. So, it might be creeping back down to oversold. So less investment is occurring right now, but the price has been going up steadily. We have strong relative strength, so we see that down here, relative strength versus SPY, persistently green. We'd love to see that. And we want to see a strong industry group, which we also have here. Again, this was in Mark's commentary, but this was one of the sectors that he said had been performing well, the healthcare sector. So it's definitely something to watch out for, but it does check off all our criteria. The key here is that we would want to always enter a position like this when it's oversold, not overbought. So we'd want it to be below that 30 marker line. So had you invested in, early April, let's say, you would be in a somewhat good position, or, even back in late February where it was oversold again, it had just started to have a bullish power gauge rating, just started to improve in relative strength and money flow. That also would have been a good entry point. We're going to approach bear stocks in the same way. So again, it's not going to be a smooth bell curve downwards. More often than not, it resembles this Y-cuff pattern, but instead of higher highs and higher lows like we saw in a bullish stock, we see lower highs and lower lows. So don't be nervous if a stock, that you might be shorting or you bought a put option on goes up shortly. It might just be in the short term. And more often than not, it'll just follow this pattern where there will be some volatility, but it's, if it's a very bearish stock, then it is heading downwards. So let's look at a bear kind of example. I don't know that this really fits the definition, Apple, of a classic bear. It's always important to keep in mind outside factors that might be influencing this. Mark wrote about this in his commentary last weekend, but Carl Icahn, he's kind of a figure, prominent figure within the finance world, and he had some very negative comments to say about Apple, which may have caused them to perform badly in the last couple of days. Sometimes you just have to take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt, and and realize that this may not exactly resemble a classic bear just because they got some bad press recently. But, just to use it kind of as a comparison, traditionally with classic bears, what we look for is a very bearish or bearish rating, and we do have that here, but it's not persistent, right? So we had it neutral for a long time. It was below a falling long-term trend, so that's also not a good sign. But it hasn't been extremely bearish, so I would be wary of that. And then we want to look at the money flow, relative strength, and industry group. So with regard to money flow, yes, there's been periods of red, but there's also been high periods of green. It's not persistently red. Again, the same, relative strength, it has definitely been underperforming the market, which is not an optimistic sign. But the industry group is strong. But again, it's tech, it's a FANG stock. So something to keep in mind. All right, so those were kind of our examples. Now I'm going to go through a quick tour. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. I'll be able to go over them as soon as we finish this tour. I promise it'll be quick if you're a return subscriber, to one of these sessions. It'll just be a review for you. But if you'd like to search for stocks and ETFs, simply type the ticker symbol into this upper left-hand corner search bar. If you'd like to add it to a list, once you've typed it in, there should be a plus sign. You just click that plus sign into the list that you'd like to add it to. In order to add a new list, simply click user lists and hit enter. Once you've typed in the name of your list. Again, I highly recommend putting dates on your lists because it's very interesting to see how those stocks have performed over time. Pay attention to your global filter settings. I mentioned this when we were looking at the screener, but the filter will be on if it's blue. It'll be gray if it's inactive. And as I said, it'll allow you to specify certain levels of price, liquidity, and capitalization. So again, if you want, above a certain amount of liquidity, then you would specify that in the global filter. The alerts mode, to the right of that funnel icon is this bell-shaped icon. So if you're looking at a particular list, or even if you're just looking at the financials, spider sector, you'll be able to click that bell symbol to see if any stocks in that list have triggered a type of signal. So you'll be able to see either bullish signals or bearish signals. So this will show you all the types of signals that have been recently triggered. So if, a couple of stocks have triggered momentum breakout or oversold buy signals, you'll be able to see that by clicking the bell symbol. And you can view that mode, the alert mode, in any type of list, not just a user list. If you'd like to view previous signals on the charts, this actually isn't in here, but I'm going to mention it anyway afterwards. This red and green triangle symbol here will allow you to view signals on the charts. A common question that we always get is which signal is the most useful? And my answer to that has always been I can't say, because signals are really more calls to attention rather than calls to action. So just because you see a buy or a sell signal doesn't mean you should act on it, but rather if you were looking to buy a certain stock or sell a certain stock already, and your analysis of the market and your analysis of that particular stock was really leading you in that direction, and it triggered a signal, that should really act as more of a confirmation of the conclusion you were already forming on your own. But that said, I generally like to look at oversold buy and overbought sell. The other signals are also interesting to look at. You can also add these in your screener criteria. So say you're looking for classic bulls and you want to see which ones are oversold. You can say triggered an oversold signal in the last week. Again, play around with the screener. You'll see it in there when you're using it on your own. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and it's not in here, it's an older version of this, we just updated our earnings information. So actually right to the left of those green and red triangles that you saw before, where you would look at the signal, you should see an EPS button right in between. And if you just click that EPS button, that's how you see the earnings information on the chart. Those are a couple of questions that we've gotten lately, because normally you would click the EPS button that's next to the options button, and we've kind of switched that in an effort to make it easier for you. So if that was a question you were having, I hope I helped you answer it. But back to this, to see the full power gauge rating ribbon, for a particular equity, you would just go to the upper right-hand corner, click the white triangle with a circle around it, and that'll allow you to drill down further into the specific Chaikin power gauge rating for that stock. So if you'd like to see which category it's most bullish in, if you want to even see within financials, you would just click the plus symbol and see which of the specific factors within financials are strongest. You could do that. This is exactly what I was referring to. So it used to be this way where you would click EPS and then click show earnings on chart. But actually now that EPS icon is going to be right there on the chart, it's going to be right here in between the crosshairs and the green and red triangles. Last but not least, our portfolio health check and power gauge reports are absolutely essential. I don't use these enough, but just recently I've been trying to use them more. A portfolio health check will allow you to get a summary of the performance of an entire list. So if, for example, you wanted to see how your list from a month ago was doing, or even just how all the classic bears are doing, you would generate a portfolio health check, and it will tell you how each stock is doing, which ones are reporting earnings, things like that. And here's what it looks like. And if you would like to get more detail and a more in-depth explanation on a specific stock, you would actually just generate a power gauge report, which looks like this. So that's the other example. So a portfolio health check is a list of stocks. A power gauge report is one specific stock. And it'll give you kind of a more in-depth explanation into why we rated a certain stock bullishly, bearishly, or neutrally. Again, mentioned this in the beginning of the session, your resource center is going to be crucial for just learning more about Chaikin. You'll find our user guide information there, the money flow document, how to access subscriber session recordings. So if you want to view this recording, it'll be in the resource center as well. And here's what it looks like. The resources page, you would simply click subscriber session recordings, which is right underneath educational webinars, and you'll see all of the recordings that we have. So that includes our open forum sessions, pre-market sessions, option sessions, etc. And I highly recommend watching these because sometimes it can be difficult while watching something live to absorb all of the information, whereas when you watch a recording, you can kind of pause it, take some notes, things like that. Great. All right, thank you everyone for listening. I'm going to switch to my live Chaikin app and maybe go see if there's some questions. Cool. All right. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in now, and I would be happy to answer them or go through them to the best of my ability. So I see one question here. Discuss stock rotation and how we should prepare for it, such as the methodology. So that's a great question. I think that the stock rotation, you can tell when you're looking at the power bar differentials from week to week, right? So when we look here, I'll just actually look at the spider sectors now. So when I look at utilities, for example, so let's go to XLU. I just clicked utilities, and I can look at a couple of the composite stocks. So what I see here are a bunch of stocks that have definitely performed well, but with utilities, you know that it's a somewhat defensive sector, right? Like people always need heating and electricity, but it's good to know, that these types of stocks sometimes have ceilings. It's not always like an indefinite ride upwards. So while they've been performing bullishly, some of them might be a little bit overextended, which we might see here, where stocks that had previously been doing well might get bumped down to, I guess, a neutral plus rating. What is a neutral plus rating? It's a stock that would otherwise be rated bullishly, but it's now below its long-term trend line and thus gets bumped down to neutral plus. So honestly, with regard to sector rotation, I get a lot of my advice from Mark Chaikin, and John Schlitz, which really further emphasizes the importance in reading those documents, because they'll be the ones to give you that expert Wall Street experience advice in terms of which sectors are kind of moving. But what you want to pay attention to is, okay, if they say that utilities is a defensive sector that is being moved out of, and financials, materials, and healthcare are being moved into, that's where I would look for more growth opportunities. So I would go down to those sectors and maybe look at their top holdings. So if I was looking at financials, I might look at a couple of these. To see which ones might be good candidates. Maybe ones that are, kind of on a little bit of a pullback, right? So they got bumped down to neutral plus. Maybe they triggered a buy signal. These might be stocks that I would add to a watch list where I could see, wow, this might be a good entry point. It's a bullishly rated stock, but right now it's not doing so well. Maybe some bad press, things like that, but I do see it's oversold. These are definitely some stocks that I would add to my watch list. So hopefully that answered your question. I know it's a bit long-winded. Let me see. Oh, I don't want to minimize that. Options. You're welcome, Nanette. All right, Kenneth asked an options play. So I believe you're asking within the options play module. And I think you are asking about when you switch between the bearish and the bullish ratings, and whether or not. So one thing to keep in mind, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak with someone from Options Play. It was a very, very helpful conversation. So Options Play, if you didn't already know, it's a separate company that we partner with. So all of the measurements that you see here are proprietary to them. So the scores that they give you, that's based on their own formula, but you can use Options Play very successfully in conjunction with Chaikin, just something to keep in mind. So I asked him, I said, hey, it looks like you seem to prefer these bearish strategies, or Options Play seems to recommend these bearish strategies and the spreads more often than not, depending on whichever stock you're looking at. And I said, why is that? So he said, well, it seems that more often than not, stocks experience sharp downturns more often than they experience sharp upturns. So stocks, will gradually rise, but are more likely to drop further in a shorter period of time than they are to go up further in a shorter period of time, if that makes sense. But if it looks like it's really not switching a lot between bullish and bearish in terms of those scores, it could just be that, the option strategy that you're looking at, I guess it wouldn't be that different if it's not a very volatile stock, right? So it's not likely to change a lot in the short term. But if you'd like, you can always change the strike price, the dates. So, here I'll look at modify. So if I wanted to, I guess, change this to be a later date, I clicked modify. Maybe I'll go to January of 2017. And I'll also put that to January of 2017. Interesting. So they give me a worse rating. Again, for Options Play, I think it's actually kind of too much to discuss now. But I would highly recommend actually attending our Options Play session, where we'll go over the best practices of using Options Play, and you can ask about some specific stocks. Actually, I would really recommend, if you had a specific stock that you were looking at that didn't seem to change too much between bullish and bearish, that might be helpful, because I think it really depends stock to stock. But just one more thing that I wanted to tell you about Options Play. If you click this guide button, it's all the way on the bottom, and if you don't see it, then your screen might be zoomed in too much. That happens sometimes. You would just click view at the top here and then zoom out. That's just on my browser. I'm using Google Chrome, which we also highly recommend. But if you click guide here, all these blue flags will appear. These are really helpful in terms of learning what each thing in options play means and why they placed it that way, what it, just giving you a more in-depth explanation. You can also check out the Plain English tab, which will give you a more in-depth explanation of the probability of each trade happening, things like that. Fizz. National Beverage. That's a good ticker symbol, I guess, for beverages. So let me just click out of that and reload it. We'll see what happens. All right, bullish and bearish. Interesting. So I do see that it is changing. Oh, I guess these were different questions. You weren't asking about this with regard to options play. All right, let's look at this. What do I see in Fizz? Okay. So if I'm qualifying the stock, first I want to make sure that it has a bullish power gauge rating, which I see that it does, but it's not very persistent. I see this big period of yellow, which kind of worries me a little bit, but I might add it to my watch list because it had been performing bullishly in the past. I also want to look at money flow, which is weak. Not a great sign, especially because it's also overbought. So again, it's close to this top volatility band. It's overbought, probably likely to dip back down again in the short term. And I would want to see, some more confidence, or at least that money flow is improving, right? So it's not such a bad thing that it's negative, but you'd want to see it at least getting closer and closer to the positive line, which could be the case. So something like this, again, I would add to a watch list. I keep, as I told you, all of these lists, and I have a ton of dates here because it's really helpful for me to just know when I was looking at that list of stocks and maybe why. It is above its rising long-term trend. The relative strength seems to be good as well, and it is in a strong industry group. What I might do here, as I talked about at the end of the presentation, I would go to this upper right-hand corner, and I would click Power Gauge Report. So cool. So now they're giving me a more in-depth explanation of why it's rated bullishly. And as you can see, they'll kind of give you a more drill down into the financials, earnings, technicals, experts, so on and so forth. I don't need to read through all of these, but I really do recommend generating this report to get some more insight into why we rated it bullishly. So hopefully that was helpful. I see that you were asking about yeah, insider buying is definitely good. That's actually one of the criteria that Sandy loves to account for in her screener. She loves insider activity to be bullish. So which article mentioned the stock rotation, Market or Morning Insights? I was referencing it was Market Insights. So I'm going to, what I talked to you about before, I clicked the light bulb symbol. And again, that was this light bulb right here. I clicked it. And then I got to this page, which is Chaikin Insights. And I believe it might have been from last weekend's article, but it could have been from one before that. Gotcha. All right. So this will show you so he, in his ETF sector update, he says, I guess utilities regain recent losses while energy, so on and so forth. I'm pretty sure it was in last week's where he talked about the rotation. So bear with me. I will just go to the other one. I'm just going to scroll down. Cool. So April 24th, Goldilocks economy, ETF sector update. There we go. Here we are. From a price point of view, there was a group rotation out of defensive sectors like utilities and consumer staples and into energy, materials, and the financials, where the upside price continued to confirm the positive potential of the Chaikin power bars. So that is actually where I was referencing it from, and that was from April 24th. So this was Market Insights. That's from Mark. And Morning Insights is actually from John Schlitz. So you'll see on this right-hand side, you can access both. And it's really cool to actually see, the stocks of the week. This is included in each issue of Market Insights on Sundays. But if you wanted to just isolate his stocks of the week over time, you can do that as well. So again, I highly recommend just exploring everything in here. I feel like I discover something new every day. There's a lot of information that's really helpful. Great. So is this the same as the hot list? Mary, great question about the hot list. I actually didn't even talk about those, but I would love to now. So when you look at the hot lists, these are a very, very helpful and useful resource that we provide. What you can look at here are, bullish turnarounds, bearish turnarounds. These are lists that we create to hopefully maybe, save some time for you. If you don't want to look at things in the screener, which I do highly recommend, you can enter your criteria in here, save the list. You can also look in hot lists, right? So instead of in the screener saying, I want to see which ones generated a money flow buy signal, you could just look right here and it will tell you 18 bullishly rated stocks, which have all generated that signal recently. You might look at our earnings hot lists. You might look at actually our Chaikin low beta growth UIT, our unit investment trust. We partnered with First Trust to create this investment vehicle, and you can see the stocks that we picked to go in each of them. So Series 2, we made a second one with them as well. And that's been pretty successful. So kind of cool to see how those stocks have performed. So again, explore these on your own, draw your own conclusions. You might choose to add some of the stocks from these lists to your own user lists, which I also highly recommend. Great. Mary, correct. Just because it generates a buy signal, you're absolutely right. It does not mean buy now. As I said earlier, these are really calls to attention, not calls to action. So you want to make sure that, if you're already leaning a certain way towards a stock where you've evaluated the market, you've evaluated the stock, you think it's a good bullish buy, and you think it might be a good entry point. If in addition to that, it generates a signal, great. It should be an added confirmation of a conclusion you were already forming on your own. So that's absolutely right. But they're important to keep track of. And, if I wanted to look over time, when a particular stock generated signals and how are they performed. So, all right, so let's actually look at this because I think it's kind of important and emphasizes the point of just because it generates a signal doesn't mean it's a buy now, right? So this generated a signal here, an oversold buy signal, but probably was not a good time to buy. We didn't really have persistent green. The relative strength was just underperforming the market. Poor money flow. I would not have bought the stock here, even though it generated a signal. And as you see, it continued to underperform the market and do poorly. So the signals can help, but you have to have all of the other criteria satisfied as well. All right, if there are any other questions, definitely ask them now before we wrap up. Yeah, no problem. So our last call for questions before we wrap up today. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to check us out again tomorrow, anytime this week. If you have any other questions, attend any of our other sessions. I highly recommend it. You can also email us at support@Chaikin Analytics and we'll get back to you. And as I said, the recording of this will be available shortly in your subscriber session recordings. All right. I hope you all have a great day.